Hi there. Well, first, I want to offer my sincerest apologies. Last week we got off to a late start. Now, this is new for all of us. Had a lot of information to give you, so the editing that we went through took a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I want to make an effort that I am going to be launching these every time at 3:30 on Thursday. And so for those of you who were watching and watched at 9 o'clock, the 13 of you, I want to thank you. But I am going to make that effort to be there at 3:30 every Thursday. Okay, enough. Let's move on. You know, there are some things in this world we can't see. One of them is wind. We can't see it, but we can feel the effects of it. And then sometimes if it gets to be very destructive, we can see the damages that it creates. Well, composition is a lot like that in the arts. You really don't see it, but you know you're captivated by it. And it's important. It's extremely important to understand how to take your work and to bring somebody in and then captivate them and hold them to that painting or that drawing of yours. You could have an immense amount of talent. But if you lack the composition, it's not going to hold them very, very long. Case in point would be like this orange. You can see it looks photorealistic. You can see that it's realistic, but it's just an orange. It's not really much of anything. I've drawn it on there with water looking like there's water droplets on it, but okay, it's an orange. It has no fluid mobility. Your eyes don't go anywhere. It's just stuck there. It's nice. It's great for a logo, but as far as anything, as far as art is concerned, as far as composition is concerned, it's just there. And in this episode, that's what we're going to study. We're going to look at how composition can bring a person in and hold them there. Come on, let me show you a few other things that deal with composition. The mural you're seeing behind me is one that I did about 4 or 5 years ago. And there is a sense of composition to it. It's very busy. It's intended to create images that invites people to Lynchburg. But it also has a lot to it, so that when you come by and see it only once, you don't captivate or catch everything all at once. In some cases, composition is supposed to do that, and some of the famous masters have done that excellently. But you can see how long the mural is. This one's here about 50 feet long. So the whole object to this is to try to capture people and see the welcome sign for Lynchburg. It's kind of a takeoff from a 1950s postcard. But there is composition. It moves, it flows, it captivates somebody and brings them into that area so that they can welcome them. Let me show you another. Finally, this mural here. It has a sense of composition. It's using color, depth, muted color. If you notice right back here, they tend to fade those colors or blend them out, and it creates a sense of depth, giving you a feeling that you're coming in and out of that mural. It's joyful and heartwarming. At the same time, it captivates the eye. The colors are rich, and they're really wonderful. There's a sense of variety, with the exception of, well, not exception, but for looking at this part here where there's hardly any hearts, but right over here it's rather busy. There's a flow that brings you up and around. That's called composition. And in this episode, that's what we're going to study. Come on, let's go.
Okay, guys, let me tell something to you. Come close. Don't be afraid.
Composition. Well, it can be complicated, but it can also be very simple. But let's take it for what it's worth. As I said earlier, what composition does is it draws in the viewer. It gives them a sense of optical travel into your painting or into your work so that they're fascinated and transfixed to the story that you are showing or even the emotion you are trying to depict. And it all starts here at the basics of drawing and composition. Part of that is derived from the Fibonacci spiral. It's derived from the Fibonacci sequence, which is derived from the Fibonacci numbers. Let me explain. The Fibonacci sequence is extremely fascinating as it's intricate in all paths of our lives. It is a very popular topic amongst writers, mathematicians, artists, and naturalists at a high level of understanding in their respective fields. The sequence is a series of numbers in that each number, known as Fibonacci numbers, are the sum of the two preceding numbers. For example, the series starts with 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, so on and so forth. The Fibonacci sequence, which begins with the numbers, is also used in analytical and artificial systems such as financial markets. So let's get into the mathematical equations. Open up your book.
Come on, bring it on!
No! No!
Wow, ease up. I was just kidding. Let's move on. As the numbers increase in size, the quotient, or the number resulting from the division of one number by another between each successive number, is a pair of Fibonacci numbers, is close to 1.618, or its inverse or opposite or contrary in position, direction, or effect, meaning 0.618. This is what is referred to as the golden ratio. Now, the golden ratio is found throughout life, including the entire universe. The appearance of phi, which is found in the Greek alphabet and used by mathematical symbols, creates a sense of balance, harmony, as well as beauty in design, be it scientific, mathematical, or artistic. Now, the golden ratio is extremely interesting because it appears in some patterns of nature, such as spiral arrangements, the number of petals on a flower, leaves, as well as the structure of the tree, branches, and other plant life. It can also be found in animals such as the nautilus, and of course other creatures which roam around the earth. Which leads us to the Fibonacci spiral. And this is where the Fibonacci spiral is so apparent in the arts, as here. It can be found in many of Da Vinci's works, as well as many ancient structures and new structures. And of course, even here, right in composition. Now, I'm not expecting you to remember all this, and don't expect to it. But if you understand the Fibonacci spiral and you have an understanding of it, trust me, this is going to help you immensely in composition because you'll never ever see your picture playing the same way. It's going to be in the back of your head. A lot of times the Fibonacci spiral is used subconsciously and we don't even realize we're using it. It's even appeared in some of my works and I didn't even realize it was there until a mathematician brought it up and said, oh, so use the Fibonacci spiral, which I didn't even realize I was using it. It will help you to create height, width, depth. It'll help you create illusions that the person looking at it say, how did you do that? It makes you a stronger artist in composition. All the information I gave you is a lot more than you're probably going to need. But I'll tell you, if you go back to school and you're talking about the Fibonacci spiral, that's going to be pretty impressive to a lot of your teachers. All right, come on, let's go practice some of this stuff. and show you on the picture plane how we can divide our image up and make it look more interesting for the viewer. Let's go. Well, we're here. Hey, we've done a lot. We've covered a lot. I mean, there's a lot to do with composition. And like I said, it's simple, but yet at the same time, it can be rather complex. Now, like I said earlier, I went over a lot of information regarding the Fibonacci sequence and the Fibonacci spiral. But the thing is I always have this saying, it's better to have more information than not enough, even in reference. Sometimes as you get more advanced into your artwork, you're going to have much more reference, and some of the reference you may not even use or need, but you have it. And it's better to have more research than not to have enough. And that's exactly why I went into detail about the Fibonacci spiral. But again, this isn't just something that you're going to sit here and think and go, okay, now how does this work and where do I put? No, just subconsciously think about it, kind of get an idea. The other thing that we talked about was the golden ratio. And that's also important too, and it's applied to a lot of other things. Look at the chart here. The chart here of the golden ratio, as it shows, it applies the Fibonacci spiral to just about everything. If you look at the four, illustrations or layouts where it says photo, you can see how the image is divided up. It's divided up into four different areas, but you can see there's no real center. I mean, there's four dots, but they're pulled away from the center, which you can utilize this as kind of not look at your picture plane straight into it, but where are you going to anchor your subject? And if you look down the side where the star is, you can see how the Fibonacci spiral is used in different formations, straight lines, concave, convex, even in a triangle. So it's utilized in more than just a spiral itself. The spiral is used in other areas of your picture plane, in your composition. The golden ratio is not just applied to this here. It's applied to this. Now, look at the sketch that I have just done. Well, I didn't do it, but it was the sketch that we did in one of my graduate classes, where in ceramics we had to first draw out the image, and we had to use the golden ratio law or rule before we even got to designing the actual vase or item that we were going to throw on the wheel. The theory behind this is that everything is in thirds. So if you look at this final product, which is what I had designed, and this is what came up from that design, everything is broken down into thirds. The Greeks used that method very well. And in thirds, there's really no even number. You will find that also in your still lifes. You want to use odd numbers, 5, 3, probably no more than 5, definitely no less than 3. And they all want to be in different sizes. It causes variety, it creates variety, and it also adds into the composition. So let's get started on this. We have our picture plane. Now for purposes, what I've done is I've already trimmed out a line here for this. Now we're already looking at our picture plane here, and what we want to look at is we're going to take the 3 basic shapes. And to expedite this, I took the images in what we had done in the last episode, the cone, the cube, and the sphere. And so I made cutouts and placing them in the picture plane. Voila. Now, right now, there are 3 shapes. But the object here is to try to make a composition that looks interesting. Now, there's not much we can do with a cone, a sphere, and a cube. You're limited. But the exercise here is to take these items and figure out how they can place them to best create a compositional design. It's like that in just about everything that you see. Designing clothes, designing fabric, designing layout. They take the basic shapes and then kind of build around those. And that's what you kind of want to do, especially if you're just a beginner. Now, if you're more an advanced illustrator or an advanced student, you'll probably look at this and go, yeah, I've gone through this before, but it doesn't hurt to go over this again and to kind of, brush up on looking at things in a whole new way. And I'm hoping that I will be able to touch some ideas that you haven't heard of yet. Okay, the first thing that we're going to look at is when you create something such as a still life, you want to make sure that your objects are all different sizes. You don't want to have them all the same size. When they become all the same size, they become dull. There's no variety. It's like vanilla ice cream. You're just there. Or as I say, California weather. Sunshine all the time. Yeah, I know some of you are going, oh, that's what I like. Yeah, well, winter, sunshine.
Duh.
Summer, sunshine.
Duh.
Spring, fall, sunshine.
Duh. Duh.
That's why I like living where I'm living, because we get all 4 seasons. Okay, down a rabbit hole. All right, so that's what we want to do. We want to create variety, and already I have by making the cube a bit smaller. The sphere is somewhat bigger, and then of course we have the cone, which is taller. But now we want to create variety. They're pretty much all on the same playing field. In other words, let me move this up a little bit, and I'll move this up a little bit, and they're pretty much in a straight line. Not very interesting. It's got an angle, and that's fine. It's great. There's your first start. At least there is some interest. But what if we overlap these? All right, so let's take the cone and push it here. And we're going to take the sphere and we're going to move it here. And then, of course, we'll take the cube and push it back here. Now what we've done is create a little bit of depth. We've created this sense of overlap here, where now the sphere is in front of the cone. That creates a sense of volume here. The cube, being that it's smaller, is giving the illusion that it's further back. Now we've created a sense of depth. We have a bit of the Fibonacci spiral here, and it's laid out in several different ways, but I'm not even consciously thinking of it. It just kind of lays out that way. But you can see that. And here we have a negative space in between here, which creates a sense of openness. It gives the eye a chance to rest. If we move this here, now everything gets crowded. It's all tightened up. At times we may want to create that sense of tension. We want to create that. But right now, no. We want to have an open space, so we could do that here. Now, if we wanted to make that cube small, we can do that by simply moving this over here, and then, come on, cooperate, putting the cube in front of the sphere. Now suddenly, it's no longer depth, which is telling us it's far away. It's now telling us that this cube is smaller than these objects here because they're in front. They've overlapped here. Now, one of the things that you want to watch out for, and I've seen this especially with beginning illustrators, is creating tension. Tension can be rather uncomfortable. Let me show you. If I move this sphere over to the side, and I've already created that just by not moving this, and then just touch this right here, that is called tension right here, where they contact each other. It's almost like when a viewer looks at it, it's like taking fiberglass and then putting it in your back over here, a little strand of fiberglass, and that itch, it's, ugh, but that's what it's for the eye. It's that touch. The eye can't tell if it's behind, in front, is it touching next to it? And it creates a tension there. So you don't want to end up having your composition to have that kind of tension. You either pull the item away as such, or overlap like this. That makes it more appealing, and it creates a flow, a sense of, well, composition, a sense of flow and continuity that we're moving around with. Now, what I would suggest is that try and do this first. Draw out your images and then lay them out, or you can sketch them out first. And that's where you go back to your newsprint. Make small rectangles and then figure out what is the best way to work on my composition. Implement the Fibonacci Spiral. Implement the chart that I just showed you about the golden ratio, blank, the golden ratio, and then see and play around with how they would work and how you would pretty much manipulate and work with those items and how they would come across. Okay, this episode is probably a smaller and shorter episode. And basically what I'm doing is I'm kind of showing you how to play around with composition and how to use the basic shapes and what we used. You're using your light source. And now here's the other thing. Once you figure out where everything is laid out, you now have your cast shadows, which are going to be laid out in this direction from wherever the light is coming in. You may even do something as exciting as lay the cube here and then bring this over and then create a cast shadow over this here. That would create also a sense of depth and volume into your work as well. And you can find a lot of this information too on a lot of other YouTube channels and a lot of other areas where artists are working on. Using your cast shadow on here, like we showed you when we did the sphere, the cone, and of course the cube, creating these cast shadows will give you that sense of volume. Now, in our third episode, which will be coming up next week, I'm actually going to turn around and take these three basic shapes and then apply them to actual images that we will utilize, such as a box and probably a basketball or some round object, maybe even a globe, and then something that even looks close to a cone. Because the next episode following that is going to be about perspective, basic perspective, and how that also plays into your composition, which will lead up into advanced perspective, and so on and so forth. So the next one we're going to see in part 3 is going to actually be real objects. But for now, in this next week, what I'd like you to try to do is try to practice with these objects. Also practice with the light and shadow that we've worked with. Your pencils, you have a lot to chew on right now and you have a lot to work with. And start small. They don't have to be this big. But remember, keep your distance away from your picture plane. Don't get in there and start drawing really tight. Well, I mean, you can if you're starting to work on detail, but pull yourself back. Remember to keep that one arm away and your posture as well. So we've covered a lot. Your posture, your tools, your pencils, your erasers, your straight edges, T-squares, triangles, your drawing board, all of that comes into play here. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, what about AI? And what about my iPad? How is this applied to that? Well, you can apply that to your iPad. You definitely can. You can apply it, if you have one, you can apply these principles to your iPad and to the drawings on there. There's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, I'd encourage you to do that. Now, as far as AI is concerned, that's a big thing going on right now. If you look in the arts, you will find that every time there was something new, it's a novelty thing. Everybody's rushing to use that. Back up a little bit and go all the way back to when the airbrush first came out. Oh my, everybody was airbrushing. You'd airbrush on photographs. You'd airbrush to make things look super realistic. Airbrush this, airbrush that. And a lot of artists really disliked the airbrush. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. As a matter of fact, they looked down on it. And a lot of that was because people would say, well, you don't have real contact with the paper. I use airbrush, and we're eventually going to get into all of that as well. But now, the airbrush has now been accepted as something that is used. It's almost archaic now because you have Photoshop, and of course you have the iPad, which creates a lot of realistic images and a lot of the things that computers are now coming out with. This is really an interesting time because we're seeing technology and art amalgamate. It's never happened before. Well, at least as far as we know anyway. We'll get into that about art history later on. Oh, there's all kinds of different subjects we're going to be talking about and getting into. But right now, this is just the beginning of what we're working with. So yeah, if you're using an iPad, definitely use that iPad. Oh, and another thing I forgot to tell you. I now have a Gmail address. And what that's open for now is if you want, you can submit your artwork and I can critique it for you. What I'd like you to do, if you want, you can submit your name. If you're not underage, you could place your age and the province, state, country that you're from. Not too much information, just enough to let us know where you're from and how old you are to see what you're doing. And if you want it critiqued, I can critique it for you. Or if you want it to be displayed here on the channel, I can display it for you as well, especially the ones that are really coming along. If you're going to send comments on the comment section. We don't want to send comments. We want to use it just specifically for critiquing, for work that you're submitting, so that I can post that and really show off your work and show off some of the other stuff. I'm going to have some of my students in here that I had in the past. One student who I have, his name is Aric. He is phenomenal. Now, I call him the master of charcoal. He's a very humble young man, and he doesn't think he is, and he really is. He knows his stuff. He took a few of my classes, and I worked with him, and man, he took off. I'm really proud of him. I've had quite a few students do that, and I'm going to probably feature a few of them in here that have done really, really well. Okay, well, that's going to conclude this part of composition. I know it doesn't seem like we did much, but we did if you really look at it. We have a knowledge of how to lay things out and how even science and mathematics works in the arts. Things that probably aren't even taught to you about. But they do work together, and if you look around, you can see how composition works. So anyway, this is the professor, Professor Arnulfo Jacinto, and like I said, we're going to come back next week and we're going to use real objects. Not that these aren't real objects, they are, but I mean objects that we can see and create our own still life and start building on that. And we'll work on that for next week because that's going to be something. And then I will take that image and then you can try to replicate that image and then probably post it online for us. Okay, well listen, it's been wonderful. We will see you next week. And in next week's, like I said, episode, we will be talking about the actual still life, and the week after we'll get into a little bit about perspective. It'll be the basics area, and that'll be part 4, and that'll conclude drawing and composition, and then we'll move into perspective and advanced perspective and working on that. So as always, may the Lord be with you. Take care, be careful out there, and we'll see you next week.
Contra bomba!